I'm endlessly fascinated and curious about the world around us, about business, about politics, about the arts, about culture, developments, social issues, and the people. Most importantly, about the people that are shaping our future. Every night, I get the opportunity to have conversations, to dive into conversations with thought leaders, with change makers, entrepreneurs, politicians, and everyday heroes who unpack the ideas and stories that I think matter to all of us. What's the future of our economy? What's the future of our country? How do we build stronger communities? What can we learn from music, theater, sports, politics, the arts? How does policy shape our real lives? What does leadership look like, real leadership in today's environment? If it's interesting and relevant and topical and we're talking about it, you'll hear about it here at 6 o'clock on the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I want to have real conversations, in-depth conversations. These are ideas we're sharing. This is the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Thanks for joining me. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. So, I think one of the big topics in Canada today is this potential pipeline to the West Coast. And, what's happening? Carney and the Premier of Alberta, Mark Carney, our Prime Minister, and Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, seem to have come to an agreement. Then we've got the Premier of BC that sounds like he's against it, then he's for it, then he's against it, then he's for it, I'm not sure. And then we've got a cabinet minister that resigns out of disgust over the lack of support for climate change. And then yet a lot of other people seem to be in support. And I see a poll that comes out and that says that 50% of the people in Canada, according to Nanos Research, are in support of this. And so I thought the only thing to do would be to check in with the number one expert on these topics in Canada, Heather Exner-Pirot with the Macdonald Law Institute. I've had the privilege of chatting with you, Heather, a few times before on different issues. And so you're in Calgary. You're from Alberta. You're a strong proponent of partnering up with Indigenous groups, and so I think you're going to be able to tell us a little bit about, how the Indigenous groups on the West Coast are going to be dealing with this. But then you're also a strong advocate for, Canada's energy superpower, building pipelines, etc. So, tell me, what's your assessment of what's going on, and is this thing going to get built? Should it be built? Is everyone going to agree? Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, and we'll get to all those things. I'll just say, to start us off, my initial reaction was very positive to the MOU, and I'm very glad the initial reaction of most Canadians is very positive to the MOU. And this is, I think, a well-needed centering of Canadian politics, of finally having some policies that appeal to the people in the middle instead of the louder voices on the far left and the far right. And I think exposing, some of the, of how some of the liberal progressives have different views than the Carney centrists and the Carney moderates, and I'll be anticipating what that means. But in terms of the pipeline itself, I do think it will get built. I have to say, a year ago, I would never have guessed it would get built. I've never have guessed that there'd be popular support for this, that it'd be in the news again. And obviously, Trump has done that favor for us of bringing it back. But to me now, the train is moving. And it's going to be really hard to stop this train. Oil is still pretty low, $60 WTI, and we're kind of chomping at the bit to get more egress. So I can't imagine what that will look like when oil starts to get, higher and there's more demand in Asia. So I think it's a matter of time. The only question is, how hard will we make it, or how easy will we make it on ourselves?
And what do you think the answer is going to be to that?
Looks like we're going to make it hard on ourselves.
Talk me through, stage by stage. Alberta, even her own party seems to be against her entering into this MOU. Then tell me about BC and where you see Premier Eby, and maybe he's benefited by what appears to be a leadership collapse in the opposition in British Columbia. Then tell me about the Indigenous bands that have been, I think, against it, but then sometimes I hear that they're for the pipeline, but against the tanker issue. So walk us through all those different political issues, if you could.
Great. Let's start with Alberta. So it was, widely reported, so she entered in this MOU. She had her list of 9 bad laws, was giving Carney 6 months to address those. We expected the Grey Cup. Obviously, the budget vote delayed that by about a week, but here it came. And I have to say, I think she got 90% of what she asked for. Very positive for the province, and I think will unleash some real investment. I think it is actually quite meaningful what was agreed to in the MOU. Then she had her UCP convention. That was not a mistake. They had to get that agreement before the UCP convention, the AGM that she had to present at. It came a day before, so right at the nick of time. She could not go there empty-handed. And of course, there wasn't unanimous support, and there was some boos and jeers when she said, "I hope you see that Canada can work." And what people need to appreciate is that even though the majority of Albertans don't support separation, the majority of UCP supporters do. And you can expect that ones that go to party conventions are particularly politically motivated, have particularly strong views, and so that's a very tricky tightrope for her to walk. But on the other hand, you see that 74% of Albertans support this MOU. It is extremely popular, and after all, she's not governing just the right, side of the province. She has to win general elections in the province, just like everyone else has to win general elections if you want to be a premier. So overall, good politics. She'll have to convince the right side of the base, but positive for her, I would say for sure.
Now, what about these agreements to climate action that she's agreed to in the MOU? Are they? Do they have any meat? Are they of any value?
Well, this is the thing that I think people have missed in all the villainizing of Alberta is that she's been saying net zero by 2050, and the oil and gas sector has been saying those same kinds of things for many years. And in fact, Alberta was the first jurisdiction in North America to have a carbon price. And so there has never been this climate denialism at, the governing level or at the oil and gas sector level that people may have ascribed it. And so the ask, even, a few months ago, the 90, I think we're up to 93 CEOs from oil and gas companies put out their own letter of ask, very similar to Danielle's bad laws. And one of them was, it wasn't to get rid of the carbon price. It was to allow it to be governed by Alberta under the tier system, to not add another federal layer on top of it, that the tier system has been working since 2007 and not to mess with it. And that's what the MOU commits to. So far from wanting to do nothing on climate, I see the province and the sector trying to do is find a way that it doesn't kill us economically. Find a way to thread that needle to maintain some competitiveness while still doing what you can to reduce global emissions and their own sector emissions.
Okay, BC.
Okay, this one is particularly interesting to me because first of all, a year ago, the BC NDP were still pretty much against all fossil fuels. And then Trump came along and made his threats. And now they've really embraced LNG, liquefied natural gas. And you wonder what explains this? One is, the Trump tariffs and Team Canada, all those things. And the other is BC's terrible fiscal situation. They've had 4 credit downgrades. Their budget is in tatters. They don't look strong on the economy. That almost cost them that last election, came down, to a single seat. And so they've had to change their tune a little bit on natural gas. And I think, they had to do that as pragmatic, again, wanting to win general elections, but their base still hates fossil fuels and they'll always hate fossil fuels. And so I think the compromise for EB was to say, well, we have to embrace BC's good natural gas, but we will still hate Alberta's oil. And so to try to distinguish their, what they get royalties for, which is natural gas, and what Alberta gets royalties for, which is oil. And I think, and his particular rhetoric really heated up in the last few months, which you have to appreciate is also because he had his own leadership review with the BC NDP. And so again, he had to give red meat to his base and say, we never will have this pipeline and we want this tanker ban and not under my watch. And then again, you see as soon as his leadership review is over, that again, he's toned down the rhetoric a little bit. So there's a lot of politicking going on here. There's a lot of, having, a difficult tightrope for all of these politicians of meeting the expectations of their base which tend to be more extremist, and meeting the expectation of the median Canadian voter, which generally is going to favor pipelines and is going to favor building things. And so BC's having a hard time. David Eby is on the wrong side of public opinion on a pipeline in BC even, actually. And I think now that the BC Conservatives have, maybe will get their act together, or at least have a promise of getting their act together, it's going to force Eby to come even further into the middle, I would guess.
So I saw this poll that Nanos came out with that said 50% of Canadians were in support of a pipeline. I did not see what the BC number was. Did you?
I think it was 57. And Brian, was it 50 or was it 56? But the important thing to say here is I think it was 38 opposed, 56 were in favor. So we're still almost talking about a 2-to-1 ratio in terms of those who favor a pipeline versus those who oppose. And I've said this before, but I have not seen a pipeline poll in 2025 that didn't have a majority in support of a pipeline. And that was whether it was national, that was whether it was BC, that was whether it was specifically a Northwest pipeline. And so it is clear to me, and this is why Carney did what he did with the MOU, that the median Canadian voter is in favor of exporting more oil and gas, producing more oil and gas, becoming stronger and more prosperous as a country on the back of that foundational sector.
Okay, so let's talk about Indigenous groups.
So this is one, and you know me, Brian, I care quite deeply about this, and I've been watching this very closely for the last 10 years, and watched this, and I said I've seen this movie before, because I watched what happened with Trans Mountain and Coastal GasLink very closely, and I just always will want to remind people, it feels like, Indigenous people are against pipeline. That's what we were told 10 years ago. And we did end up building Trans Mountain and Coastal GasLink, and they both had majority Indigenous support. They both got built. They're both operating safely today. I find that the media tends to amplify anti-development Indigenous voices. I think it's often easier for some Indigenous leaders to speak out if they're against things. It can be harder for the ones that do want the oil and gas, that want the jobs, to speak out. You're often criticized as being greedy or a sellout, or you're a bad Indigenous person. You aren't committed to your values. It's harder to speak out, but at the end of the day, we do know that when these deals get negotiated, there's often a way forward. There's often a series of benefits that can convince a community to go ahead. So I'm not sure exactly what will happen here. We know what the law requires on the duty to consult and accommodate. We can get into that. I do know there are coastal nations on the Northwest Coast that are against oil, are against fossil fuels, but there are very many along the route that are for it. And we do know that Indigenous communities don't have a veto on development. What they have is a right to be consulted and accommodated on projects that impact their rights. So I still see a way forward on this, but absolutely you would rather get the consent. Your goal will be to earn consent, but it's not a standard, it's an objective.
Okay, so talk to me about this tanker ban, because what I've heard is that there's a chance that the pipeline gets approved, but the tanker ban stays in place. And then at the same time, people have told me, and hopefully you can explain this better than I, that the tanker ban actually is not great from an environmental standpoint, because then what you've got is smaller ships coming to port and then actually transferring the natural resources, the oil, in the middle of the ocean from a small ship to a big ship. So tell me about this, if you could.
Yeah, I have no idea what Eby is talking about to build a pipeline with and keep the tanker ban in place. If you look at a map of where the tanker ban is, it's meant to limit everything except for the Port of Vancouver. And that was obviously so you could have Trans Mountain. So, okay, we'll have Trans Mountain, you take it out of Vancouver. Everything else all the way up to Alaska is part of this ban. And the ban was only put in place to stop, if you ask me, a Northwest pipeline. So they rejected Northern Gateway in 2018, started work on this oil tanker moratorium. It was passed in 2019. So it was an insurance policy that if anyone else was, crazy enough to try to be a proponent for this pipeline, it wouldn't matter anyways, because the tanker ban would be in place. Now, what happens in the Port of Vancouver, it's not as ideal of a port as a Prince Rupert or a Kitimat would be within the tanker ban area in the Northwest Coast. to BC because it is busier. And it is, to your point, you load up these tankers. They don't carry a lot. You only load them 70% full because it's too shallow, and they have to go to sea and then put them onto bigger tankers. And so you aren't getting the maximum value. It's costing a lot logistically, and you just can't fill it as fast. And so it is not, and the one that goes through Vancouver, Trans Mountain, that was already a twinned pipeline, by the way. So we've already twinned the pipeline that you can get through Vancouver. The first one was the 1950s. And so if you do want to add a 1 million barrel a day pipeline, you're not going to add 1 million barrels through BC, through Vancouver and through that port in Burnaby. If you want that 1 million barrel pipeline to get to Asia, it's got to be in the north.
And so we got to get rid of this tanker ban and allow them into Prince Rupert?
Well, you do. And again, like I say, like that tanker ban was never sound science. It was never sound law. It was about, campaign promise that Trudeau made, to his environmentalist progressive wing, that they were going to kill Northern Gateway and they wouldn't allow it to happen again. But I mean, the world ships tens of millions of barrels of oil every single day. And we ship it out of Vancouver. There's never been a marine spill in that whole lifespan of Trans Mountain. We ship it in on the East Coast to get to the Irving refinery. Like, there is nothing new to us about shipping oil, moving oil. The world does it every day. No one who works in oil business wants to lose oil. They don't want it to spill. And there's lots you can do to prevent. There's lots of new technologies. There's lots of new infrastructure engineering to really limit the risk a tremendous amount. And we ship lots of things. We're already shipping hydrocarbons in the form of natural gas liquids out of Prince Rupert. And we're shipping LNG, obviously, out of Kitimat. And so it's not even new for us to ship fossil fuels. There's coal shipped out of there. It would only be different, the quantity of oil. We also ship oil all over the place, and diesel, because all those communities in that tanker ban area require diesel, obviously for, electricity and fuel and all those things.
Now, what about this? We should make it a deeper water port so that the tankers can come right in rather than having to transfer oil in the middle of the ocean or outside of the coast. Is that something that I understand is up for debate as well?
Well, it's not up for debate. It looks like it's happening. So that is, the desire to dredge in the Port of Vancouver, in the harbor there, so that you can fill the boat to capacity. Like I say, they're only filling to 70% right now, because as they fill it up, it gets heavier and it gets too close to the seabed. So it's already Trans Mountain's plans to dredge. And as I understand, the federal government, approves it. I don't know if it's gone through the official approval process, but they don't have a problem with it in principle. And same with David Eby. David Eby has said, let's expand, let's fully use Trans Mountain. You won't get any disagreement with that from anyone in Calgary. They absolutely want to fully use Trans Mountain. They want to maximize all the potential. They want to expand it as much as you can. That is in the plans. Trans Mountain last month said that they are planning to expand it by 360,000 barrels a day. Part of it is the dredging that you just discussed. But again, that will get us, let's say to 2028, 2029. We're looking at, how are we going to grow into the 2030s? How are we going to meet Asia's demands in the next decade?
Fascinating conversation. It's going to be a big change in Canada if we can actually get this pipeline built. We're going to take a break for some messages. And when I come back, I'm going to ask Heather Exner-Pirot, is it going to get built? Because supposedly this is all going to be private money. And last time we said it was going to be private money, the federal government had to step in and spend a couple $2 billion making sure that it happened. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in just 2 minutes talking about Canada as an energy superpower. Can you believe it? Stay with us, everybody. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got Heather Exner-Pirot of the Macdonald-Laurier Institute with us today. She's an oil and gas expert. She's an Indigenous relations expert. She's one of, if not the smartest young ladies I've had the challenge and opportunity to interview on my radio show. And it's been a real pleasure getting to know her over the years as she's chatted with me about all these different issues. And you actually think that we could be an energy superpower. And you were one of these people that told me that there was that opportunity. And then, what? Who knows? And this was before anyone ever heard of Mark Carney's name, or at least heard of his name as potential prime minister. And things are changing. But then some people have said, no, This was just an MOU because it's private money that's got to build it, and it's never going to get built. And so this was just a gift to Daniel Smith and Alberta, leaving a possibility, but it's not going to get built because no private money is going to come in and invest in it. What do you say to that?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who are extremely skeptical on both sides, I will say, and you can tell I'm maybe an optimistic person. And just to address your first point, Canada has always had the resources of an energy superpower. We've just never had the attitude of one. And that's what I hope is changing now, is the attitude. So it's obvious that there was private proponent interest in such a pipeline because Enbridge was the private proponent of Northern Gateway and spent nearly $1 billion trying to get this pipeline approved. Did get it approved, had that approval rescinded, and just lost money, and investors hated it. And a lot of investors, looked at that as a red flag for Canada, that even when you have an approval in hand, even where you do everything right, the government can come in, depending on the winds of the day, and reject your project, and your money is kind of burnt in an incinerator. So we know that there was private interest, and we know why there isn't now anymore. That all the pieces of the puzzle that was put in by Trudeau largely still exist, or certainly existed until the MOU was set up. The Impact Assessment Act, which Jason Kenney had called, the No More Pipelines Act, which allowed the government, the Minister of Environment, to veto any project on the grounds of any global emissions, anything that would stop us from achieving Paris, which could be any threshold of emissions. The emissions cap on the oil and gas sector, which would have precluded any additional production. So you're not going to build a pipeline if you have no producers who are going to commit to fill it. And then finally, that oil tanker ban. Who is going to build a pipeline? How are you going to convince your board and your shareholders to go out and raise, 20 or $25 billion to build a pipeline that goes into a tanker ban area? So it's obvious why no private proponent has yet stepped up. So the MOU puts in places conditions under which you could foresee a private proponent step up. And one thing that I feel has been missed a lot is Alberta has said they're going to act as the proponent now. Danielle Smith has set up, her committee, but she has a technical advisory committee, which she has said publicly includes Enbridge, South Bow, and Trans Mountain, the three oil companies, the three oil pipeline companies in this country who have the biggest export pipelines. So the fact that those three companies have come on board and have been publicly supportive tells me that they don't think it's a crazy, stupid idea. They're not separating themselves from the idea. They're not pish-poshing it in public, but they are actually on the technical advisory committee, so they can inform what a route should look like, or what would interest them, or what might bring them on side, and also help inform it. So that to me is very important. And then the MOU does mention that the MOU itself says this won't get built without private proponent. I don't think there's any way they would have put that in there, that qualifier, if they didn't think that at some point a private proponent might come on board. Now, how do you de-risk it to get a private proponent back on board? One is you say, well, you'll get rid of the tanker ban, you'll get rid of the emissions cap, and you'll make reforms to the Impact Assessment Act. MOU, yes, check. The other is using finally that C5 Building Canada Act. The Major Projects Act that Carney passed, that would say that you can, if you get designated a nation building project, you'll get approved within 2 years, and we can kind of use the power of the cabinet to kind of get rid of any bad laws, species at risk, or migratory birds, or Impact Assessment Act that gets in your way on the way. And that's what would have killed an Enbridge, and that's what made TMX so expensive. And the third thing, which would de-risk it and make it palatable, is providing that Indigenous loan guarantee for an Indigenous consortium. So when you're trying, and Brian, you know this, you're trying to raise, let's say, $25 billion, let's use that as a round number for this pipeline. If you can commit $5 or $10 billion for Indigenous equity, they're going to back Indigenous equity in it. Well, all of a sudden you've de-risked that capital stack to a great extent. Now you're just looking for $15 billion in the private markets. You already have kind of your anchor owner. And I think whatever is the amount for the Indigenous loan guarantee, whatever is the amount you have to get there, that is how you get this pipeline built by a private proponent.
Now, if Northern Gateway was approved at one point in time, why don't we just use that same route?
I mean, you might use some of the same route, but I think, it has lapsed. The approvals have lapsed. So under Canadian law, you're just going to have to do the Indigenous consultation again, and you're going to have to do the environmental assessment again. But that being said, are we at square one? like we were before. No, between Coastal GasLink, the Prince Rupert Gas Transmission, another pipeline that is about to get built, has been approved, and Northern Gateway, you know a tremendous amount about that area, where you should put pipelines, and all the environmental small things like where's the caribou calving grounds, where do the salmon run, what time of year. Those things, we do have that knowledge. And so I think when eventually you do develop, a route and propose a particular route, they do have the advantage of all that work that has been done in the past, and it shouldn't be as expensive. And they should have a better idea of where some good, places to put it that maybe are less ecologically or culturally sensitive, that you can get it. And also, it seems like the endpoint matters a great deal. Northern Gateway was going to end in Kitimat. That's Haisla Nation territory. They have a lot of LNG projects in that territory. It is getting pretty busy. And they came out and said last week that they weren't interested in oil pipeline. So it has been discussed for the last year or two that Prince Rupert is probably the more logical endpoint. A little bit more pipe you have to build, but maybe a bit less resistance from some of the nations there.
Stupid question, but this came up at a cocktail party I was at this weekend. You're talking to some people from Ontario, so we don't understand this. Please explain. The question was, how do you get it up over the Rockies and then up over the coastal mountain range? Like, what do you do? How do you do it? Do you have to tunnel it through?
I mean, in some cases, I think they do. And this is one reason why Prince Rupert makes better sense than Vancouver. When they had to build through Vancouver, just think you're literally putting pipe through the third largest city in the country, through people's backyards. And Brian, you know how people don't like to have construction through their backyards. They actually built, I think it was a 2-kilometer tunnel through Burnaby Mountain, so they could put it right through the mountains, so they wouldn't deal, instead of avoiding, 2 kilometers of neighborhoods and having residents be mad. They built a tunnel. But in general, that's not what you do. I think it goes, over top. I honestly don't know what they did, except for that I know that we've done it. They've done it twice. So however they do it, sometimes tunneling, sometimes burying, sometimes going over top, they've just done it.
Tell me about this major projects office. It's been located in Calgary. It seems to have some pretty good executive talent in it. Is that going to change things?
I'm not a huge, I'm happy with the major projects office and the people in it. I think it is a shortcut to dealing with the real regulatory reform that we need in this country. And so I think it was a political solution to a policy problem. And that's politics, I guess. I get it. It gives the appearance of momentum. But the hard work of actually improving the regulation for everybody still needs to be done. So it's not particularly good governance to say, we'll choose 10 or 15 projects and we'll give them an easy ride and we'll make them more attractive to investors. And the other 485 of you can just, Hunger Games it in this broken system that we've left behind. And so does it give a little bit of momentum? I think on the LNG projects, Solistham's LNG Canada Phase 2, yeah, that probably helps investors get more serious about getting to a final investment decision. Could it be useful for Northwest Pipeline? I think that's the one project that could actually use this designation as a nation building project to kind of, clear over some of the legal hurdles that, people are going to be bombarding it with. But in general, I don't think an ideal approach whatsoever for a country like Canada to be addressing its regulatory problems. As a shortcut, maybe, but certainly not a long-term solution.
So you think the impact assessment bill, what, as you said, Jason Kenney called, what was it? The no more pipelines anywhere, ever, and anytime, anywhere, whatever bill needs to get defended.
And we said it in retrospect. It was the no more nothing bill. It wasn't just pipelines that it quashed. It was just about everything. Only 2 projects have ever been approved. That was passed in 2019. Only 2 projects have been passed under its auspices, approved under its auspices. That was Solistham's LNG and Solistham's LNG, both Indigenous-led LNG projects. And so it did poorly also for mines, did poorly for other things. Now, here's where I need to give the government credit. the major projects office and the MOU kind of get the splashy attention. And here I'm saying they need to do the hard work of improving the regulatory system. They have to some extent done that. And in the last couple of weeks, you saw that they came out with cooperation agreements with Manitoba and Ontario. We expect more with different provinces, where they're saying within the Impact Assessment Act, this is what we'll do as the federal government, and this is what we're going to defer to you as the provinces. And so what people were calling, again, the Conservatives say we need to repeal this thing. And a lot of people in industry said, like, God help us if we have to start from scratch again, like quit pulling the rug from under us. The ask was one project, one review, one decision. Just quit overlapping with each other. Let the provinces do what they do best, and only apply the Impact Assessment Act to very strictly, narrowly defined federal effects. That is, in fact, what these cooperation agreements are moving towards. And so the work has been done where the federal government and the Impact Assessment Agency has been given the directive, given the mandate to say, figure out what you have to do as from the federal jurisdiction side, and leave as much as you can to the provinces on everything else. So we don't have this redundancy and this duplication and different chefs in the kitchen. And so some good work is actually being done on that front. And unfortunately, it's boring and bureaucratic, so maybe isn't getting the reward that it deserves. But I think it's very encouraging.
So tell me about this cabinet minister who resigned. Stéphane Gilbert, I think is his name. Some people have said this is a travesty and it's going to be, the end because all the Green Party people and the Bloc Québécois and people that are worried about climate change are going to see this as a signal that Carney has changed things dramatically. And other people have said, no, this is brilliant. This is the best thing that could possibly happen because this says, as you said about 10 minutes ago, that this shows that Carney has moved to the center. So how do you read his resignation?
Yeah, so Stephen Guilbeault is the least popular politician in Canada. I think he has a 2% approval rating in Alberta. And this was the guy, I just told you that, that the Impact Assessment Act gave the Minister of Environment veto power over any projects, over any amount of carbon emissions. That was Stephen Guilbeault. That had veto power over any major project. So did anyone in Alberta ever think that we were going to build a major project again with that guy holding a veto card? No, we did not. And absolutely villainized. This was the, Greenpeace radical who, you've seen him in his orange jumpsuit, who I think, climbed the CN Tower, but also climbed the roof of the Alberta Premier's house, and scared the bejesus out of his wife before he was an MP. And I always say, imagine if some Albertan, convoy person, climbed the roof of Pierre Trudeau or someone in Quebec, and then that person becomes a cabinet minister, in a Pierre Poilievre government later. Come on, that would never happen. So no one.
I wouldn't wait too long.
No one will miss Stephen Guilbeault. He cost this country tens of billions of dollars. He had an animus against Alberta oil and gas in particular, against Daniel Smith, I would say in particular, and was, more ideological than pragmatic, and treated climate change as religion, if you ask me. That's my opinion. And so the fact that he could not abide and stay in cabinet this deal with Alberta, well, people are complimenting him on being committed to his principles. That is maybe one redeeming feature of this person, but glad he's not in cabinet, and glad that his particular ideological slant has been marginalized in Canadian politics.
But the Bloc Québécois, the Green Party, are not going to support this. Will the Conservatives ever support this?
Well, the MOU is more popular among Conservative voters than Liberal voters. Perhaps, who can remember the last issue that was true on? Again, this is Carney's, plot, strategy to get, a centrist voter, to get the blue Liberals and the red Tories to his side. Stephen Guilbeault was certainly not one of those. But again, and this is Abacus polling, and they've done a great job. The MOU is not unpopular in Quebec. It's more popular than unpopular. There's more people in Quebec that support it than don't support it. And this, to me, is what it's revealing. That there is such an acceptance that the progressive green demographic in Canada and in politics, in the media, was the Canadian view. And to me, this MOU is exposing how much that is actually a far left of the country. It's not, the progressives are not in the center. They are not the median voter. They are not in touch with the average ma and pa. They are an urban progressive faction that is increasingly marginalized in a time of geopolitical and economic turbulence. And so again, I am glad to see Guilbeault as one of those to become marginalized and to exhibit, this transition from a Trudeau era liberalism to a Carney era liberalism. And I don't know that Quebec, I don't think it'll sway that much in Quebec one way or the other. What do I know about Quebec politics? All I know is that the vast majority of Canadians support the MOU, including in Quebec.
Heather Exner-Pirot, you're fantastic. We're going to take a break and come back in 2 minutes. I'm going to ask her what else we need to do to change this this attitude that she says we need to change to be an energy superpower. She says we've had the resources. We've always had the resources, but we just haven't had the right attitude. What do we need to do? Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're talking about Canada as an energy superpower. Heather Exner-Pirot is our guest, and she says we've always had the resources, but we just haven't had the right attitude. So, Heather, what else do we need to do? I understand that you spoke recently to the Alberta Chamber of Commerce. What are you saying about what we need to do? Critical minerals, commodities, etc. What's your attitude toward this opportunity for Canada?
Yeah, well, I'm very excited. I'm very bullish. I'm very optimistic. This is Canada does well in an upswing of a commodity cycle, and you're seeing all the pieces that start to fall into play here. So I just want to talk first of all about the resources that would make us an energy superpower. Of course, everyone knows about the oil. I don't know if everyone knows that we're the world's fourth largest producer, third largest exporter of oil, on top of having the world's fourth largest reserves. So we are a major producer, but we've always sent almost all of it to the United States instead of sending it abroad. So we've never been able to leverage that for any more geopolitical influence. And I've often said, a Keystone XL makes us an energy colony. A Northern Gateway would make us an energy superpower. And so as you see...
Say that again. That's interesting.
Keystone XL will make us more of an energy colony, and Northern Gateway will make us more of an energy superpower.
I agree. Thank you.
When you do energy, when you start shipping it to Asia and we see that the center of gravity of geopolitics is moving west, and it's moving into the Pacific. And obviously the United States was a superpower, and we're much likely to head into a bipolar, multipolar world. It is absolutely in Canada's interest to make friends and to be a friend to Asian allies. First of all, you want to resist that they would be more dependent on Russia or more dependent on OPEC. But also we want to have those allies in Asia also for both, economic growth, and also kind of as a hedge against some political, shenanigans going on. And so there's nothing that makes someone your friend as much as providing them energy security. So the more that we can, commit LNG and commit oil. And then the other one I'll mention is uranium, which Canada's second largest exporter, second largest producer of uranium, has phenomenal reserves in Saskatchewan. Again, you are really able to provide a lot of that energy security for your allies, all in one package. You got your oil, you got your natural gas, you got uranium, all come from Canada. Who else would you rather get it from? And so that is the way to leverage, our resources to, again, protect ourselves in this big bad world, and also to find new markets. You can expect that American consumption will maybe grow, marginally, but Asian consumption will grow significantly. That is where the vast majority of energy growth is going to come from. But just on to the larger commodity cycle and why this is, tends to be good for Canada. We are the second largest country in the world. That means we have the second most resources, and it's, unevenly distributed based on the commodity. But in general, that's what we do well, is we produce natural resources well, and we are only 40 million people. And so we always will need to export. That means we don't need to hoard it. That means that, United States or China will be huge producers, but they need to consume almost all of what they produce themselves. Canada can export it, and that makes you very valuable to potential allies. You've already seen uranium, crest up have a big upswing last year. Gold this year, everyone has seen gold's hitting new records. I like to say, 4,000-year-old records are getting smashed, every month on the price of gold. Silver has just had a phenomenal run, kind of following on the heels of gold. And now, right now, and within the last couple of weeks, you see natural gas and copper now starting to run up. And in some inventories and some metrics, record copper prices as well. So all the signs of this commodity cycle are in play. Eventually oil will join in the party. Eventually foods, I think, grains and those kinds of commodities will join in the party. And what does Canada do? We export energy, we export minerals, and we export food. And so we had, that great economic boom between 2006 and 2015 was on the heels of a commodities upswing in a commodity cycle. And I think it'll be great if we can do that again. Only this time, I think we'll maybe be a bit smarter and a bit more strategic of having, again, instead of having a colony mentality, of having how do we use this, to assert our influence, to advance our interests, to showcase our values in the world in this next cycle.
What about critical minerals? What do we need to do there?
Well, I like to use this. Gold is not considered a critical mineral in Canada. It is in Nova Scotia, actually, but in general, it's not considered a critical mineral. But it's doing exceptionally well in Canada. It didn't need, a special, political, pat on the back of being a critical mineral. The last 6 mines in this country that were open were for gold. And it is definitely Ontario. Half of Ontario's mines are gold. We're all obsessed over the Ring of Fire, when actually what you guys are is a gold producer. And the price of gold is doing great. And now it's our second largest export. It's ahead of light duty vehicles.
Gold is our second largest export ahead of cars?
Correct. Look it up. I think if you do like all automobile, it isn't, but if you do light duty vehicles, it is. But either way, phenomenal, and has been like the one bright spot. I'll say silver lining, but it's a gold lining of the Canadian economy. And so, which is to say that when the price is healthy, when the commodity price is healthy, Canada can build mines, and Canada can increase global market share, and Canada can become rich off these things. And so love to see that on copper. There's a few copper mines that are, the next mine to open will probably be copper. That's the Ferran mine in Saskatchewan. BC is working on some expansions. And then you would hope to see, iron, nickel, all those kinds of things join the fun. Zinc, those are all the ones that really, kind of matter on a volume scale. And so some of it is, the provinces had to do a lot better job of permitting. It wasn't all the federal government. The provinces really were laggards also. And you've seen after the Trump threats, as a consequence of that, a lot of them have tightened up their regulation. Ontario has really led that. And so right now I'm waiting for healthy commodities prices. And I still think, it's a big wild world out there. There's some negative things about Canada, but I think increasingly investors are starting to say, hey, something's happening in Canada. It looks like, they're not quite as stupid as they've been for the last 10 years. Maybe I'll look again. Maybe this is a place that actually wants to welcome my capital. And there's some provincial governments, out there, absolutely, trying to attract that. So I just, and I'll finish with this, Brian. It is my strongly held conviction that the politics and the politicians are lining up behind this commodity cycle, that it is not a surprise that in 2025, when you've seen some of these commodities run, when you anticipate that they will run some more, that scarcity will become an issue, that all of a sudden, everything kind of breaks loose and all the politicians in Canada say, geez, we should do something about this. And so I don't think it's too late. I think this is still a cycle that we can ride.
What about the Ring of Fire? What about Northwest Territories? I interviewed the mayor of Yellowknife, who said that the opportunities in Northwest Territories were significant, but we just desperately need some infrastructure. I interviewed people in regards to the Ring of Fire, and they said we've been talking about it for 20 years and have just not done anything. What about those two opportunities?
Well, those are not the brightest opportunities. So you say you hit the nail on the head. My husband works at a mine in Northwest Territories. They've had just the three diamond mining mines for the last decade. I think they were down to just those mines, and the price of diamonds, the commodities, the market for diamonds is very poor because it's getting outcompeted by synthetics. And so the first of those three diamond mines is actually shutting production. It's Rio Tinto's next quarter, and so it is desperate times for Northwest Territories for sure. They have not had their policy act together to welcome new investment. They are an expensive jurisdiction, and they have done many things to make themselves more expensive, not less expensive with their policies. And so now is the time for them to get the act together. But as commodity prices move up, there may be some opportunity for some investment there. Same with Ring of Fire. That was, a chromium play. Chromium prices are not particularly high right now. There's not, it's a pretty oversupplied market. And so you just really need chromium, the commodity price, to move up, and nickel. And of course, Sudbury will probably be first in line if nickel prices improve in terms of expansions. And this is where, we need to know, like, where do we make our money mining from then if it's not Ring of Fire and it's not from diamonds? Gold, and there's several exquisite gold jurisdictions in Canada. Potash, metallurgical coal, some of our nickel in the Sudbury Basin, the Golden Triangle in BC, which has gold and copper. There are places that are operating, that have had, many mines, that are attracting investment. Uranium, potash and uranium in Saskatchewan are attracting billions of dollars in investment. So there are healthy pockets in the mining sector in Canada. But loosening up our regulatory system, making that go faster, will put us in the front of the line for all the investment that we anticipate is going to come in this commodity cycle.
I keep hearing about lithium in Quebec. Is that an opportunity?
I mean, it's an opportunity. Canada doesn't have the best lithium resources in the world. So you need, and lithium is an extremely volatile commodity. And you kind of never, the Chinese manipulate it. You don't know if you're going to need, 100 million EVs or 10 million EVs. So it's been so hard to anticipate that market. But it looks like next year should be a better year for lithium. And so hopefully some of those projects, get the go ahead. Again, you're competing in a global environment, and there might be 20 lithium projects, that are very close. And when the price signal gets to a certain point, which one of those 20 is going to get the investment? And so you want your Canadian projects to say, we will be fast, we're already permitted, we're already approved, we have Indigenous consent. As soon as you get that price signal, come choose us, come put your money with us, because you're going to get a return on it faster than anywhere else. When we can start to say that legitimately and investors believe us, is when we start rocking it.
So are we going to be a energy superpower?
I mean, we might. I mean, there's two sides to this aspect. One is, are we going to develop and produce more oil and gas? Yes, absolutely. I believe that to be true. It's just too hard to leave that kind of money on the table. And I think global demand will continue to go up incrementally, fairly slowly, but other players who have been supplying global demand will start to decline. And so for me, the greatest opportunity is in kind of backfilling some of the supply that's going to go offline. Increasing our market share is a huge opportunity. And there's not a lot of other places, and there's no other democracies that have the long life reserves that Canada has. And it looks very attractive, and access to the Pacific. So I think the demand will be there. I don't think we'll ever use it like Russia or the United States, to manipulate or to leverage or to force, different countries into different positions. And so in that respect, maybe you don't consider yourself a superpower. But do I think that we will be able to be a swing supplier, someone that can provide the supply at a reasonable price in a reliable way to allies, so that we don't have terrible supply shocks, so that they are insulated from authoritarian countries, maybe manipulating markets? That is the sweet spot for Canada. This is a strongly held conviction for me. The more Canadian resources we put on the market, the better the world will be. The less that people will be dependent on some less savory actors for the things that you need for your civilization: energy, minerals, and food. And so all the more resources we can get out with a Canadian name on it into the world, I think is for the better good.
Heather, you're speaking right now to an audience in Southern Ontario. I know you're not political, but tell us, how should we be thinking about your Premier Danielle Smith? She gets a very negative depiction in the Toronto media. What's your assessment?
Well, the Toronto media to me is very progressive, and that's the side I think that's been exposed with this MOU that is maybe not in touch with the average Canadian, maybe not in touch even with the average Ontario voter. That Mark Carney found a way to work with Danielle Smith. They both expended some political capital. They both alienated a little bit of their extreme flanks to make that deal, but they're both willing to do it. And the MOU to me is very much in the benefit of Canada. Very much makes us a stronger and will make us a more prosperous country. And I feel, I am very curious. Why does that alienate progressives in Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver? Why is it that they would not want Canada to be stronger and more prosperous if the way to get through that is through Alberta's oil patch? And so that is, that to me is the wedge. And so I think they must feel threatened that if Alberta gets more relative power or more relative influence, their influence and their power diminishes. But I don't think that's true for Ontarians as a whole. Ontarians as a whole supported the MOU. When Alberta's oil sands are spending more money, as they did 10 years ago, that is Ontario manufacturing jobs. Billions of that is in Ontario small businesses, medium-sized businesses, getting all the things that you need to get the oil sands and to build pipe, the steel, the aluminum, all those things. I am convinced, yes, it's good for Alberta, but I am convinced it should be very good for Ontario as well.
Heather Exner-Pirot, Macdonald Law Institute, really appreciate you coming and really explain what's going on with this pipeline and this MOU and politics in an extremely fun-filled hour. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me on again, Brian.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining. I remind you, I'm on every night at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Calgary, Alberta, at www.960am.ca. Good night, everybody. Thanks, Heather.